Hi everyone, I'm sharing something a little bit unusual today. I'm making a sourdough bread with okara. This is okara. It is basically the pulp or the leftovers from making soy milk and tofu. I shared a video recently on this channel due to popular demand, well, by a few people who were interested. I decided to share that video. You can find that below if you're interested. But this is the pulp left over from making soy milk and tofu, and it's really high in fiber, really high in protein, and so I couldn't resist the challenge of trying to make a bread out of it. This is what I came up with. So I use whole wheat flour for some of the flour portion, and I mill my wheat in my mock mill to make my flour fresh, but you can use store-bought whole wheat flour too if that's what you have access to. Either is okay. The full recipe for this written down is going to be linked in the description box below the video, along with information about my mock mill and anything else you might be interested in. You'll find that all below, so check that out. So once you've got your 250 grams of whole wheat flour, lovely flour, then I added to that 250 grams, so 500 grams flour in total, 250 grams of baker's flour. This is heritage wheat baker's flour, which is a lovely locally grown organic flour, but it is refined. And I find that okara is such a high fiber ingredient, it's pretty challenging to bake with. So using a bit of refined flour really did help it along. I only used 250 grams of water in this recipe. And don't be fooled by this. It seems like not very much compared to the amount of flour that I'm using. But this okara, don't be deceived by it. It actually holds a lot of moisture. So even while it looks dry, it does add a lot of moisture to the dough. So this is about 220 grams of okara, which is from one batch of tofu. So originally that came out of 1 cup of dried soybeans. So I'm basically adding all of the wet ingredients to my mixer here. You can do this by hand too if you want to. So this is my sourdough starter, just straight from the fridge. That's just whole wheat sourdough starter, roughly about 100 grams. Anywhere between 50 and 100 grams would be fine. You don't have to be too precious with this recipe. It's pretty forgiving. I also added some brown sugar, which is completely optional. I don't know why, I just felt like it really helped a little bit. This is a very unusual recipe for me, and it's just because okara is a really tricky and unusual ingredient to bake with. I also added a couple of tablespoons of psyllium husk. This is whole psyllium husk, and it really helps to bind the loaf. Okara has got no gluten whatsoever, so any extra binders that you can add really do boost it along. The other thing I added to this, and this is very, very unusual for me in this channel, is I did add a little bit of commercial baker's yeast to this. It just seems to work really, really well with this recipe. This is not a style of bread making that I do generally, but to use up this okara, then it's worthwhile for me. And adding a little bit of yeast to the sourdough just gives it a bit of a boost and helps a recipe like this come along. So I just mix all of the wet ingredients a little bit first in the bottom of my mixer. And don't be fooled by how dry that looks. Trust me, it won't be too dry. And then I add the flours on the top and I just give it a mix. You can hand mix this if you want to, or you can use a KitchenAid stand mixer or any kind of bread dough mixing equipment that you have. It takes about 20 minutes in this little bare mixer that I have, but if you had a KitchenAid mixer, it would probably take maybe about 5 to 7 minutes. You can't really over knead it. It likes a good kneading, but if you wanted to do it by hand, just put everything in a bowl together and just give it a really good mix by hand and then knead it on the bench top, probably for at least 5 minutes. You just want to knead it until it's nice and smooth. Whether you do that by a mixer or by hand, it really doesn't matter. It's a forgiving kind of a bread. It's a bit of almost like a hybrid loaf, this one. It sort of behaves a little bit like a gluten-free sourdough, but not quite, because it does have all that wheat flour in there as well. But the okara is definitely a really unusual and challenging ingredient to work with. I actually want to try making some more like gluten-free style recipes with the okara. I reckon that would work really well. But for now, I thought I'd just share this wheat one because a few people were interested in it. Some of my earlier tests for this recipe, I didn't add the psyllium husk. And for this video version, I added the psyllium husk. And of course, that absorbs a lot more water. So I did add a couple more tablespoons of water. So all in all, about 270 grams of water went into this dough. I thought I'd leave this bit in there so you can see how I sort of test my doughs. I'm just sort of squeezing it, and that's a really good way to see if your bread dough needs more water. If you squeeze it and it feels really firm, then it probably is. You can add a little bit more water and keep kneading or keep mixing, because all of these flours, all of these ingredients, they all behave differently. Just a little plug here for my membership group. If any of you don't know about it and you might be interested, come and check it out at buymeacoffee.com/ellieseveryday/membership. I share a fortnightly Q&A podcast there, and there are some other benefits too. So if you want to check that out, come visit me there. And this is the dough after 20 minutes mixing in my little Bear machine. And here it is. It's lovely and smooth. So if you do this by hand, just keep kneading it. It might take you a while, but keep kneading it till you get this nice, smooth dough consistency, similar to what you can see here. Just give it a bit of a knead here to show you what you're looking for. And see how soft that is? Like, it looked quite dry in the beginning, but it actually turns out fairly soft because that okara holds a lot of water. And I don't squeeze my soy milk out that, like, my wrists aren't that strong, so it depends on how much liquid you actually squeeze out of the pulp as well. So if you think yours has got a bit more moisture in it even than mine had, then go easy on the liquid. I guess you can always add more flour if you feel like it needs it. So there you go. You should have a nice, lovely, soft dough. And then I just put that back in my mixer to let it ferment. Now, because I've added some yeast to this, it only takes about 3 hours to ferment. It really does depend. You can leave the yeast out of this and just make a pure sourdough version if you like, which it will take longer. But for me, I started at 11 a.m. and this was it at 2 p.m. It was nice and puffy. It was ready to go. It was a pretty warm day at my place that day. It's summertime here at the moment. It was about close to 30 degrees Celsius, so fairly warm day. So once the dough has puffed up like that, and you can tell it's got a bit of air in it, it's fermented, then you can pretty much just shape it, do the final proof, and then we'll bake it. I don't use flour on my bench. I find it just a lot easier to spray my hands and the bench top with water. That way nothing sticks, and it just is way much easier. There's no cleanup basically if you use a bit of a water spray. That's just what I like to do. So that's just me in the background just spraying my hands with water, if you wondered what that funny sound was. I've just got a water sprayer that I spray on my bench top, and I spray my hands with it as well. So I've just got a greased, this is a small loaf pan, and I've just greased it really well. I did just use some cooking spray for this one. And then just form your dough into the same shape as the pan and pop it in. You can see that it almost fills up this pan, but that's okay. You're not going to let this rise to double in size. You're just going to let it rise till it looks a bit puffy, and then you're going to bake it. If you let it go too far, it will overproof. So it takes about 40 minutes. It took me about 40 minutes to do the final proof for this dough on this pretty warm day here in Brisbane. So once your dough is almost ready to bake, get your oven set up. I use this roaster that I actually bake my loaf tins inside that roaster, and it just is a really easy way to add steam to your bread bakes. I preheat my oven to 220°C, which is about 430 Fahrenheit, and I preheat my roasting dish with the lid in there, and you'll see how I actually just put the bread tin straight into the roaster. You can see the dough here is pretty nice and puffy. It's ready to bake. That's as high as you want this to go. If you let that go too much further, it will overproof and it won't be as good. So try and just be cautious with your proofing, especially with these tricky whole grain, unusual ingredient doughs. So I just put my whole loaf tin straight in this roaster, spray a bit more water in there to create lots of nice steam. This gives you a really good rise and a really nice crust as well. But if you don't have a roaster, don't worry. You can just put a tray in the bottom of your oven and then pour some boiling water in that, and that will give some steam in your oven. Any way that you can add steam to this loaf is a bonus. So bake it covered for 30 minutes. So this is what it looks like after 30. It's looking very nice and golden, but I put it in for another 10 minutes without the lid. And this is it after the full 40 minutes of baking. If your oven is different to mine, which it will be, it might take a little bit longer. Just keep an eye on it. Oh, there's my cat. He loves to sneak into my videos. But yeah, it should take roughly about 40-45 minutes depending on your oven, but you should have a lovely golden, crispy crust, beautiful, well done loaf of bread. And it's very, very nice eating, this bread, I have to say, despite it being a bit of a challenge to make. But yeah, make sure your loaf is really well cooked. Don't take it out too early. Make sure the bottom is nice and brown and you're getting that nice hollowed sound when you tap it. That's important. And there's the loaf. Some of these doughs or these loaves with lots of gluten-free ingredients in them or weird ingredients, they often have a weird texture on the top, but don't worry about that. This is not normal bread making, so don't expect it to be like normal bread. But it is a fantastic way to use up this ingredient that otherwise you'd probably throw out, or I don't know what people do with okara. A lot of the recipes I've seen just don't appeal to me, so getting it into a loaf of bread was a really good way for me to use it up. You can see this is quite moist inside, and that's because I cut it too early. Normally I would leave my breads until the next day, but this one I couldn't resist. I was just a bit busy, so I cut it only a couple of hours, or maybe even only an hour or so after baking it, which is why it's kind of a little bit gummy on the inside. But the next day it's even better, and this is a really brilliant way to use your okara in a bread recipe. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. If you're looking for more information about me or what I do or my membership group or anything like that, or my soap making channel, head to ellieseveryday.com. Yeah, thanks for being here. I'll see you again soon. Bye.